Hi, everyone. It's about 2 minutes before the top of the hour by my watch, so just wanted to say hello, and we will get started in just a couple more minutes. Thank you so much. All right, by my official timepiece, it is the top of the hour, so let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where in the world you are, perhaps even good evening, and welcome to today's webinar, Q4 in 2020 Year in Review Threat Report Findings. My name is Amber Colson, Event Marketing Manager with Newspire, coming to you live from just outside Detroit, Michigan. As always, for those of you that have been on these calls with us before, I'd like to spend just a moment reviewing a few logistical items before we do get underway. Today's webinar should last about 45 minutes, give or take a few minutes. We'll address any questions you may have at the end of today's presentation. You can submit your questions at any time using the chat or questions panel on your screen. We'll pick up all of your questions from there. You will receive a recording of today's session via email in the next 48 hours. And lastly, the recipients of our coffee vouchers, those lucky folks, will be notified by me within the next 72 hours. So keep an eye out for an email from Amber Colson. I'd now like to introduce you to today's speakers, Josh Smith, Cyber Threat Analyst from Newspire, and Leah Cure, Cyber Threat Intelligence Analyst from Recorded Future, our threat intelligence partner. I'll let them tell you a little bit more about their specific backgrounds. So Josh, Leah, over to you.
Thank you very much. Certainly appreciate the introduction. As we jump into this here, probably the most difficult part of this webinar is talking about myself, of course. So a little bit about me. I'm a Navy veteran. I served in the Navy for 14 years. I was an operations specialist. Worked a lot with things like military operations and intel and doing analysis on things like that. After I got out of the military, I transitioned over into IT and been in cybersecurity now for a bit, and specifically been here at Newspire for about 4 years.
My name is Leah Cure, and I am a threat intelligence analyst at Recorded Future. I come from a financial institution where I did threat intelligence and data loss prevention, and then I moved over to Recorded Future a little over a year ago, where I've been doing research in trends within the cyber threat landscape, and then also trends within ransomware, malware, and malware distribution and development. So very excited to be here.
All right, so then we'll jump right into this now. A few of the things that we're going to cover here today. First of all, we're going to talk about our methodology and our overview. We're going to talk about the data sets. We'll talk about at the end of each section kind of some proactive things you can do in mitigation measures, and then we'll roll into conclusions, recommendations, and also the Q&A. So our methodology and overview here at Newspire, first thing we have to do is we have to be able to acquire that data. We do that through threat intelligence using things like Recorded Future. We also do it through global sources. We collect data from the client devices to look and see what kind of exploits, malware, botnet traffic, and things like that that we may see. Once we gather up all that data, we have to do analytics on it. We run that through machine learning, algorithms, and then also at the same time analysis happens with folks like myself and Leah as we take a look at things to see what trends are there, what what stands out, and also what kind of world narratives there are out there that can lend credence to maybe why something's happening. Additionally, with that, then we have alerting. So as that runs through our SIM platform, we have alerts set in place to detect those weird things when they happen and to generate an alert out to our SOC so a SOC engineer can respond to that. And then consistently looking back to see how can we improve on this? How can we tune an alert better? How can we do better with our threat intelligence? So first section that we'd like to take a look at is our malware section. So as we looked at our Q4 data for Newspire, we saw over 5 million malware events, and this was a 57% increase from activity from Q3. There was over 1,000 unique variants that were detected, which broke down to just under 500,000 per week and 68,000 per day. So one of the big things we wanted to call out and take a look at, definitely our noisiest and biggest offender, if you will, within malware, were VBA agents. VBA agent, if you're not familiar with what that is, that's a Visual Basic Word Excel file. You see these a lot in those malicious spam campaigns. Once those things, that document or that Excel file is double clicked, it'll often ask you to enable macros on it, and the phishing attackers will create some kind of a lure to try to get folks to interact with that and go ahead and click and do that. As we saw the U.S. election approach, we saw a large spike in activity, as you see there around that week 3, that red line started to go up. We saw a lot of different lures in there. We saw different things that were like voter registration forms, things that said how to vote during the pandemic, polling information, and then really anything they could do to spin a story around the election. That was a real hot topic for them and something for them to jump onto, especially with our current world environment, to try to kind of thrive in that chaos of what was going on. We did see additionally another spike that came up, that's around that week 7 area, and that was during the U.S. holiday season. And same thing, the fishers wanted to take advantage of an event, so they sent out things that were shipping notifications, maybe like, hey, you've got a FedEx package that's going to be showing up. You need to click here to accept it. Gift card registrations, someone bought you a gift card, click here to accept it. And then some like super too good to be true shopping deals. At the end of the day, fishers are going to use anything that they think they can to get engagement. They want to thrive in that chaos or those holiday events and get people to interact with that stuff. Leah, do you have anything you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, this is something that we saw throughout the year, and that we've seen for years is threat actors will use those phishing lures to entice their victims into clicking things and opening attachments and enabling macros. And we saw this with COVID-19 this year. They were using people's need and desire to get information about what's going on, and using that in phishing lures. We also saw it with the Black Lives Matter protests that were occurring. Those that was used within some phishing themes. And then, like you said, with holiday season, tax season, just standard things that happen each year. And it's likely to continue into this next year with Olympics and any other major events that are happening.
Absolutely. So as we take a look at our year in review of all of our data here at Newspire, you can see through the beginning of the year, from January until just about September, things were actually kind of on a downtrend. And then we had that massive spike of activity in September. That was a 467% spike in activity, which was attributed to the VBA agents that we just spoke of. And one of the reasons why I think this may have happened is, the folks that are attackers are also affected by COVID, just like everyone else was. As people scramble in the chaos, so were they to get things back up and running. And then when the U.S. election was coming up, especially as controversial as this particular one was, it may have just been too good of an opportunity for them to pass up, or they may have just been retooled and ready to go by then. But once September came around, activity dramatically kicked back off again. So what can we do about malware? One of the biggest things that we can do is next generation endpoint protection. And so what's the difference between next gen versus legacy? Legacy is just completely signature based. It's looking for those hashes and those signatures to determine if it sees something that's malicious, where the next generation's actually using heuristics and behavior analysis too. So even if it doesn't have that signature already within its bank, it can detect to say, hey, that file shouldn't be doing that or reaching out to that resource, and it can flag it for an analyst to come in and take a look, or depending on how it's configured, it can just straight block it until someone allows it. Um, Network segregation is another really big deal too, especially for your very high risk devices like your Internet of Things devices, things that are exposed out to the internet. Being able to segregate those within your network and ensuring it can't just reach anywhere it wants. If that device does become compromised, it prevents where they can go throughout your network and makes lateral movement significantly difficult. And then lastly, one of the things I think is most important, and I'll drum on probably a whole bunch throughout this webinar, is cybersecurity awareness training. The majority of these attacks and these breaches start through attachments in your emails, and someone executing something like that VBA agent downloads a payload, executes in your network, and then you have ransomware or something like that running rampant. Having your end users be familiar with how to identify a malicious attachment or a phishing email, and having that air of suspicion around things coming in their mailbox is super important. They're just as important in your cybersecurity plan as having a good firewall or something like that. You also need to ensure you have policies created within your organization that people know how to properly report it within your organization, and those need to be tested and ensure that your folks do know how to properly contact your security teams, your IT team, whoever it is that manages that within your group. So as we move on into botnets, one of the things that we saw here was over 1.2 million events. This is actually a decrease in activity from Q3 by almost 20%. We saw 39 unique botnets with over 100K infections per week. So one of the ones we wanted to call out here was the Andromeda botnet. This was the most prevalent that we saw within Q4. It is one of the largest and oldest botnets that had been previously disrupted by Microsoft. It's clearly still around. The folks there have rebuilt infrastructure and are still very active today. They're involved with over 80 different malware families. They distribute different things like ransomware, spam bots, and malware. And like I said, they're still out there doing a lot of things. Leah, anything you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, so still a significant issue moving into 2021. I think recently the UK announced that they had distributed a number of laptops out to students, and the Andromeda botnet malware was on those laptops, which is a significant issue when those students rely on those systems for their education. So it continues to be a threat. And I know something that we will probably talk about here is the Emotet botnet as well, which is a very dangerous type of malware that is widespread. And I think what makes them so dangerous is just the infrastructure that they've built out. They're so large that they can do a lot of damage. And so they're good to know and good to monitor for.
And so as we take a look at the 2020 year for botnets, our most active month was the month of May. This was specifically based around the Zero Access botnet. Zero Access is also a botnet that had been previously disrupted before. Their source code has also been leaked, which allows people to go out and create their own version of it, basically. And it kind of makes me wonder too about Emotet now that we've had this major disruption. While that didn't happen in Q4, as we look at 2021, those operators are still at large, and there's a huge power vacuum now from the Emotet botnet, as they were by far in our previous threat reports from quarters, one of the dominant malwares that we would consistently see. I imagine that they're either going to move and try to partner with another botnet group, or they're going to try to rebuild and get back out there. There's too much money involved for them to just kind of roll over and not try to get back into it anymore after they've been disrupted. So what can we do about botnets specifically? One of the most important things is leveraging threat intelligence. So using someone like our partners here at Recorded Future. Newspire leans heavily on their threat intelligence to help our organization identify these sorts of things, to be able to see those command and control servers, those malicious IP addresses, and know what's new and what's happening. So with that, these botnet infections, they're detected after post-infection. So you see an internal computer attempting to reach out to a command and control server, and that gets flagged, and then you can identify that infection. So having that threat intelligence to be able to tell you, especially as frequently as these operators shift their infrastructure around and know what's currently malicious, is extremely important. And so with that too, as we said, it's detected post-infection. So preventing the infection in the first place is important by keeping your antivirus updated. And again, using that next-gen AV that we had just talked about in the previous section. And lastly, threat hunting too. No threat intelligence, no antivirus program, no piece of security software out there is ever 100% perfect. Not to mention there are brand new things that are discovered every single day between that infrastructure. It gets shifted around. So it's important to threat hunt within your environment to determine, should my organization's, devices be reaching out to this foreign country, or should it be using this service? We don't even use that service in our organization. Why are we reaching out over that? So looking for those abnormal things and also knowing your network and what it is supposed to be doing can help you identify those anomalies. And at that point, you can focus on those to determine, is this bad or not? So as we move over into the exploit section, we saw over 51 million exploits during Q4, which was an increase of 67% from the activity in Q3. There was over 326 unique exploits, and that broke down to roughly just over 4 million per week. So as we look at our exploit section, actually our highest witnessed exploit in Q4 was SMB login brute forces, but something that happened during Q4 wanted us to focus specifically on this one. And I'm sure you've all noticed by now the week 7, that giant spike of activity there. So one of the things that had happened is while we had, this was also something that we'd learned from Recorded Future, was that there was a list of 49,000 vulnerable devices specifically for this CVE vulnerability with the Fortinet SSL VPN. So a threat actor had published this onto a dark web forum, and basically it said, here's all these different devices that are vulnerable to that exploit. Shortly afterwards, there was a 4,000% increase in activity against that that was witnessed. It shows these threat actors are out there looking for help from other threat actors. They're communicating, they're working together to find these exploits, and even after that, they're looking for that low-hanging fruit. This has been patched by Fortinet for a couple years now, and if organizations following a proper patch management should have been protected from this. But regardless, the threat actors out there decided they wanted to take a shot at it once they had this easy, accessible list of devices that were exposed. And so it really stresses the importance of applying patches within your organization and also being aware of when you have a vulnerability within your network. We'll talk a little bit about this in the remediation part of this, but having subscription to security vendors for your tech stacks and things like that, so you can see those security bulletins when they're released. You'll know when there's something new out and you can apply those patches. Leah, anything you'd like to add on this one?
Yeah, I think talking about patching and patch management is a really important subject. We did some research on this last year about surrounding patching and disclosures of vulnerability and exploitation. And we found that the number of days between vulnerability disclosure and actual exploitation is decreasing. So that average number was 13 in 2018, 2019. And midway through last year, it had decreased to 2.7, which is a scary thought for people who are in charge of patch management, because a lot of times your patching is happening in month cycles. And so 2.7 is a very small amount of time. On top of that, we also found that threat actors are much more likely to target vulnerabilities that have low complexity and higher critical CVSS scores. And this vulnerability here falls into that category. So just understanding the context of the vulnerabilities that are being disclosed and having that threat intelligence to be able to prioritize patching and argue that this needs to be patched because it's being exploited in the wild or there's a POC out for it. Having that context and that intelligence is really crucial for patching.
All right. So as we look at 2020 as a whole for exploits, the largest one that we saw was Double Pulsar. It was the largest exploit for Q1 and Q2 from our reports. And this is another one, as we discuss, you may know it is most infamously from the WannaCry ransomware attack in 2017. This was one of the things that contributed to that. It's a part of a toolkit that can be easily downloaded by threat actors, and it's very powerful. This is one of the things that was suspected to have been created by the NSA. And again, it's very easy for people to get a hold of, to go download it and use it as part of a toolkit and to attempt this exploit. It's been patched for quite a while now, but it again stresses the importance of applying patches, because the threat actors are out there searching for the folks that still haven't patched their systems and are looking to run rampant within them. Overall, for 2020, we saw exploit activity continuously increase, and it hasn't, at least at the end of December there, it hasn't trailed off at all. I would expect in 2021, we'll continue to see probably an increase. And I expect personally to see a lot of activity focused around any kind of VPN or RDP, remote connectivity based exploits, because as our whole world has shifted to more and more remote, I'm sure many of you are probably working remotely from home as I am right now, as we have to try to access our systems in the organization. If those have a vulnerability within them, those threat actors are going to want to take advantage of that and exploit those. So exploit mitigation and response, as we have stressed numerous times here already, keep your systems and applications updated. Again, one of the best ways you can do that is to monitor security news and vendor security bulletins. If you don't know you don't have an issue, you can't fix it. And so make sure you subscribe to those things within your tech stacks, so you know when those bulletins come out. And then also utilizing a firewall with an intrusion prevention system. They can have signatures put into them to look for things like Double Pulsar. And if it recognizes it, go ahead and stop it in its tracks, so that attack isn't successful within your environment. Another interesting call out for Q4 that we wanted to talk about was a targeted ransomware campaign, specifically within the healthcare industry. I don't think it'll be a surprise to anyone here either that healthcare is a very high value target, because of everything that happened with COVID, whether that be just because they are in some part of the supply chain for the vaccine, or just in general, hospitals really can't afford the downtime in any way, shape, or form with the way that the world environment is right now. And so because of that, they became a very lucrative target for threat actors. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, along with the FBI, the Department of Human Health, they released a joint advisory regarding this particular campaign. And so with that, the threat actor, which I always find these names very entertaining, is Wizard Spider. And it's probably a good heavy metal band too. But they are the threat actors that were attributed to making these attacks. They were very, very quick about these attacks too. And at one point they hit 6 hospitals within 24 hours. And again, as we stressed, they were, really focused on these targets because they were hoping they would make the payouts very quickly, because, they can't afford that downtime. So with that, they were deploying things like TrickBot or BazarLoader. And then after that, once that was within the network, they would deploy Raikou ransomware. And so after that, though, from the week 1 to week 3, we saw a lot of that activity start to decrease. And Leah, anything else you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, ransomware has been wild this past year. 2020 was a tough year, and then in the ransomware space, it dominated that space. Towards the end of 2019, we saw that threat actors and ransomware operators began developing extortion websites where they would be publishing their victims' data. And this turned ransomware infections from just an inconvenience where your systems were locked to a full out major data breach where your data is exfiltrated and potentially sold or exposed. And this not only leads to security issues, but also reputational damage, and is a massive issue for organizations globally and in all industries. And it continued to be an issue to the point that in October, the United States Department of Treasury released an advisory basically warning that paying ransomware operators those extortion payments and those ransoms could lead to sanction violations. And so while this was not something that organizations wanted to hear, obviously they don't want to be victims of ransomware in the first place, but I think it put organizations who deal with facilitating those payments a little bit on edge, like law firms and insurance companies and cybersecurity companies, just kind of understanding how they need to facilitate those payments in the future. We were looking to see if anything had really changed from that announcement, and we didn't really see any big changes in ransomware operators or victims paying. But one interesting thing that did happen is DarkSide Ransomware announced that they were going to start having their infrastructure hosted in Iran because they didn't want that exposed data that they were posting on the websites taken down. And when they did that, they kind of became, they were put on like the no-no list for a lot of cybersecurity companies for paying it, because they were in a country that was explicitly stated in that advisory that was published. So it'll be interesting to see in 2021 if we continue to see law enforcement on a global scale kind of crack down on these ransomware operators and malware operators in general.
And so as we move over to our 2021 predictions, as I kind of mentioned before, we certainly expect that anything that's involved with remote desktop protocol or VPNs, if there's a vulnerability released on those, they're going to be very highly targeted. As Leah just attributed to as well, ransomware is evolving consistently. That is going to continue to grow. We will see new tactics, things like in the previous year, how ransomware operators then began to exfiltrate data, then publish it if people didn't pay. They're going to continue to grow and find new ways to apply additional pressure. And then, like we also talked about during the botnet section too, certainly expect someone or Emotet to try to fill that power vacuum, whether that be Emotet rebuilds their infrastructure, they partner with another botnet and start to share tactics and procedures, or somebody new evolves from this and takes that spot. And to wrap things up on a conclusions and recommendations, we've addressed all these things through the different sections already, but just to kind of cover them up again, educate all your users. And to me personally, that's one I think is the most important things is really we need all of our organization to be aware of cybersecurity. They don't need to be a cybersecurity analyst, but they need to be able to identify a suspicious email or a suspicious attachment. Should have I really received an invoice from this client? And in also developing that culture of being okay with questioning something through a different channel than the email you received it on, giving that organization actually a call and saying, hey, did you send me an invoice or something along those lines, to ensure the things you're interacting with are legitimate, because threat actors are looking for that human element that they can exploit, because none of us are perfect. And then so taking a defense in depth approach too. Not a single technology will ever protect your environment. And so layering those things to be able to spot at different spots throughout your plan, whether there's something malicious happening within your network, can help catch where one technology may not cover it. Leah and I have both stressed this very much too about patching things, and that's also something I would think is super important. I understand why organizations may not always want to patch, because it's downtime, you may have to take things off, but threat actors are expecting that and they're looking to prey on that. And it's a delicate dance between organizational uptime and applying patches where you may have to take a system offline. If you're going to leave something unpatched, you need to make sure you fully understand what risk it is that you're accepting within your organization and what it may cause within your organization, or make sure you have some form of internal mitigation for whatever that vulnerability is. keep your malware protection updated. It's no good if you have it, last time it's got an update was from last year. Everyone here knows that this space moves blindingly quick. And if you don't have the newest signatures available or the newest heuristics behavior analysis, you may miss something. And segregating your network too is also very important to make sure that if a breach does happen, it minimizes where things can laterally move throughout your network, and make sure that especially those high risk devices, things like the Internet of Things devices that people connect, forget about, never apply firmware updates to, or anything like that, are specifically, segregated somewhere within your network. And as far as the actual presentation, that wraps it up for myself and Leah. We're here for the Q&A, and so we'll pass this back over to you, Amber.
Thanks so much, guys. One of the first questions that I did receive, which is one I can actually answer, somebody asked, hey, where can I get a copy of the full threat report? And if you are interested in reading even more than just some of the highlights that Leah and Josh discussed today, you can go to our website, newspire.com, and you should see it there. We'll also send a copy of it to you after this presentation. With that, if you do have a question, I encourage you to use either the chat panel or the questions panel on the screen, whatever is easier for you, and we'll pick up questions from there. A few questions that are coming in here. So Josh, Leah, you've both shared a lot of good remediation strategies today, a lot of things that folks should do to help their organization, but it's hard to know where to start. So what would be one of the first things, or what would be the first thing that you would do to protect your organization based on what you've shared today?
For myself personally, and then I'll certainly let Leah, jump in here too with what her thoughts are. For myself is, if your organization needs the assistance with it, seek out an MSSP that can help you out with that. But again, as the other thing that I've stressed, multiple times throughout here, I still think your biggest bang for the buck is user awareness training, educating your people. Because again, the majority of breaches start from a phishing email attachment, and having your folks recognize those things and having that air of caution and suspicion around those, to not interact with those, and knowing who to properly report those to find out, is this malicious or not? That's my personal opinion on that one.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I also would add figuring out what your priority intelligence requirements are. And so I think that's really important for an organization figuring out where to start, is figuring out what's most important to you. So what type of data are you protecting, and making those figuring out what those requirements are on a large scale across your organization. So pulling in players across the organization that have a hand in dealing with the data, figuring out, is it financial data? Is it proprietary data? How can we protect it? What does our network look like? And what's the most important thing that you need to look at? And then based off of those decisions that you make, you can make actionable decisions protecting your network.
Excellent. Building off that a little bit, what are some specific actions that security teams could take to better educate their employees?
Well, there's certainly, in general, a lot of the different Outlook programs, or I'm sorry, the Outlook program nowadays has the phishing banners you can have installed to let you know when an email has come from an outside organization. There's other kinds of plugins and things like that too that can assist with being able to identify when there is something malicious out there. Interesting enoughly too, Record a Future here just released a free browser extension that can help block the hyperlinks for known malicious activity. So things like that can go ahead and give you a help and assistance within preventing your users and educating your users when they see bad things out there.
Yeah, one thing I actually we've done at previous companies I worked at, and I think is really a good way to do it for people who aren't really involved in the cybersecurity space is doing testing phishing emails. So sending them out to users on a regular basis, just so they're aware that they can get maybe an invoice notification or a delivery notification, just types of phishing emails that they'd probably commonly see. And so that they're aware of it and a little bit on edge to know, okay, I need to be conscious of what I click on and what I open. I think that that's been really effective. And as much as employees don't like doing the education training, sometimes I think that they can be effective if they're done in the right way, and just making sure that people are aware. And I think having people feel like they have a role in the security of their company, and that they're contributing to the security is a really good way to kind of push that across an organization.
I agree with you, Leah. Those test emails that folks send out are the best. Just a couple of weeks ago, a marketing colleague and she sent me shared her screen with me and said, hey, look at this email. Do you think this is one of the phishing tests? What should I do? So she clicked the button in Outlook and we both cheered when she got the phishing email. So we learned a lot from those. Dwight has a question. He says we have Bring Your Own Device. And we wonder if there is a platform that will auto-install some sort of endpoint protection on them before they can join our Wi-Fi. Is that something that either of you are familiar with?
So I am familiar from back in when I took my degree. I don't have a lot of hands-on experience with them, but Dwight, I am aware there are platforms out there that you can subscribe. I don't unfortunately even have a name for you of one of them, but they exist. So basically from there, you would install software on that BYOD device. And when it checks into your network, it'll look for, do you have the current patches? Do you have the current version AV? Basically whatever your checklist is, you configure within it. And if it does not, it won't allow it to join your network until it meets those requirements.
Good. Okay. What about when patching is controlled by a different team? So somebody else is controlling that for you. What strategies can security analysts take to communicate the need and the importance of that patching?
Leah, would you like this one?
Sure. Yeah, happy to take it. I think something that Josh had said earlier is just like being able to use the intelligence and prioritize patching is really important. And it can be difficult because if you're the team that's owning that patching process and you're not involved with the security side, you're more involved with the IT side of things, you do not want downtime. And if you're patching, that could impact legacy systems. It could have a major impact on people's workflow and business continuity, and no one wants that. But also no one wants a major security breach. So just being able to communicate that this is important. Why is this important? Providing context and not crying wolf either, being able to say definitively, we need to patch this immediately. And then these also need to be patched, but this is a priority. And I think that that's where threat intelligence comes in to play, because you're able to communicate that efficiently and effectively, and also just building a relationship with that team. So if your team's not responsible for patching, but you're the one that's communicating why it needs to be patched, if you can develop a relationship between your team and that team, maybe have regular check-ins and calls, and I think that would be really beneficial to those teams.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. What are some other resources that security teams could use to stay up to date with the latest TTPs and vulnerability disclosures?
In my opinion, MITRE Attack Framework is one of the things I spend a lot of my time in. On their website, you can see what the current advanced persistent threat groups are currently doing. And there are many, cybersecurity news sites out there that you can stay on. Some people may frown on it, but I like Reddit even as well too. And social media a lot of times can be the kind of the cutting edge of where you first see something before a publication grabs a hold of it. You need to do your due diligence because it is social media. But with that being said, a lot of times you can see things, right as they're happening throughout there.
Yeah, I think following the news, understanding what threat actors are doing is helpful. Even podcasts, there are some cybersecurity podcasts that will kind of walk through what's going on. A plug for Recorded Future. We have a podcast that's really great, and actually how I heard of Recorded Future. And yeah, I think just maintaining awareness of what's happening via the news, via podcasts, and threat intelligence is also really helpful in that space as well.
Excellent. All right, I think we're down to our last question, and I like this one as a nice way to wrap up. What recommendations do you have for people who are either looking to get into the industry, or maybe like some of the folks on this call are a little bit newer to the industry? I think you touched on a few things actually in your last response, but what else would you advise? And maybe Leah, we'll start with you on this one.
Sure. So I think one of the hardest things about getting into the industry or being new in the industry is if you don't have experience, it's really hard to get a job because every job is looking for someone with experience. So one way to do that is through internships and co-ops. And I've spoken to a lot of people who are, deep into their careers, elsewhere, like outside of the cybersecurity space, and are nervous to come into this field because they don't maybe feel that they're too old for an internship or co-op or something, but you're not. And I think that that's a really great way to get involved. On top of that is just building your network and communicating with people, building connections with people. Networking is huge. It's obviously a little different in a COVID world where we're all remote, but you can still do it by reaching out on LinkedIn. There's a lot of cybersecurity, women in cybersecurity and tech groups that I'm part of, and they'll host happy hours and coffee hours. So getting involved with those are really great. And just being a sponge, learning as much as you can, listening to podcasts, reading, watching YouTube videos, staying up with the news. I think those are some of the things that you can do to really get yourself advanced within the field.
Yeah, I certainly agree with one of the big things that Leah said was everybody already wants you to have experience before you can kind of get a job in cybersecurity. I was fortunate enough that when I started here at Newspire had positions that weren't like a cybersecurity analyst like I am right now. We had things that were more of just a tech support role for different services that we offer. And so that gave me my foot in the door here at a cybersecurity company, even while I was doing something that wasn't necessarily, MSSP related, but it gave me a good growth trajectory and gave me time to advance and really learn about that stuff before I moved into a role that I now am very happy with, doing full time. I think you have to have passion in this industry too, because it can be a battle sometimes to get your foot in the door. If you're not honestly passionate and enjoy this stuff, it also moves so quickly that I spend a lot of my free time, looking at this because I just like doing it and like reading about what else is new out there. I also think, some certifications for folks who may not have that actual experience yet. Some, basic things like Security Plus and stuff like that shows that you're serious about it. You have an educational benchmark and you've actually gone out and, put yourself forward to get a certification to show how serious you really are about getting a role within the space.
Perfect. Well, as someone who is newer to the cybersecurity industry, you saw me taking a lot of notes while you were talking. So thank you for all of those tips and suggestions. At that does wrap up our content for today. I want to thank you both for presenting with us. Leah, thank you so much for being our special guest today. And thank you to the entire Recorded Future team for your partnership and all the intelligence and insights that you share with us. To our audience and our attendees, if you do have a question that we weren't able to answer today, you can contact us at webinars@newspire.com. I will pick that up and I'll make sure to connect you with the right person within our organization. Do check out our website, newspire.com/events, for information about future presentations. We have a really exciting one coming up the end of March with IDC and Fortinet, and we hope to see you for that presentation. And with that, we'd like to thank you for joining us today. So on behalf of Newspire, on behalf of our presenters, I wish you a happy and healthy day, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Bye-bye.